everyone, Ashley Mailloux here with the DRF's race of the day for this Saturday. It's out at Santa Anita Park. It's their 8th race, the Grade 2 Summertime Oaks. 3-year-old fillies in the spotlight, going a mile and a 16th on the dirt. We'll take a look at this field of 7. I think it's actually a really interesting event. There's a couple horses that I think are going to take a lot of respect in here. And just looking at the morning line, it kind of tells you, the Alice look on the inside, 5-2, but a couple of horses in that 3-1, 4-1 price range. So it'll be interesting to see the tote action that these fillies attract on Saturday. But let's start with the horse on the rail, the number 1, the Alice Look. This one has recently joined the barn of Chris Davis. That was kind of breaking news in the past week or so. And she comes into this race fresh off a 3rd place finish in the Kentucky Oaks at big odds. She was 30-1. She ran okay, I thought, in the Fairgrounds Oaks, but she was still well defeated. The top 2 were really clear of that field of 5. But prior to that, she had some really nice efforts at Fairgrounds. It was great to see her to get to Churchill Downs and run such a big performance. It was one of her best buyer speed figures in her life in 88. And in terms of kind of looking at the pace complexion of this race, there are a couple horses that I think are going to be forwardly placed. So I'm hoping that she kind of sits a trip just off of it and it makes a late run. Mike Smith is going to climb aboard her for the first time. Number 2, Window Shopping. She's a lightly raced daughter of American Pharoah. We're going to take a look at her most recent performance. She stepped up from Mailloux welterweight competition to the Grade 2 Santa Anita Oaks, and she had to face the big hitter in here at 4-5, the winner, Fiza, who ends up being much the best in here. But this horse actually kind of in terms of her trip, I really liked the way she ran. You can see her on the outside in here. She's the number 6. The number 8 is And Tell Me No Lies, who she'll have to face again, but she is passing horses and she's trying to make up ground. And she was pretty far back early on in this race. So in terms of the way the race set up, she certainly had her work cut out for her, but she did, I thought, ran pretty well considering the competition that she faced. Hunter Barrios had climbed aboard her for the first time in that start. It's a career best number. And just looking at her in here, the pace should be decent enough. She's going to have to close from off it again, getting her second try at a mile and a 16th as well. So she's 5-1 on the morning line. And the number 3, And Tell Me No Lies, we saw ended up finishing second in the Grade 2 Santa Anita Oaks. And she made that trip to Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Oaks, and she just didn't fare well at all. You kind of look at the trip in there. She did have some problems in the race, but she never got rolling in there. So she is returning to Santa Anita, which is the track that she's found a lot of success at. You can see 3 starts over the main track, a win in 2 seconds on her resume. Another one that I think in terms of setup in here is going to be closing from off of it. Very similar kind of running style to the number 2, Window Shopping. The number 4, Lily Pooh, is an interesting horse. Now in the barn of Michael McCarthy in those last 2 starts. Eclipse Thoroughbred Partners saw something that they liked in this one and got involved. They tried her at 7/8 at Santa Anita 2 starts back. She didn't fit well, but we'll take a look at that most recent effort. They took her to Golden Gate. They got her on the synthetic up there. She's the number 4. She was forwardly placed, the number 5 in this race, forwardly placed throughout. And she's going to really roll late in here and really, kind of shine it on here and draw away from this field. Obviously, it was the Cal Oaks. She's going to face deeper waters on Saturday, but it was nice to see her get a confidence-boosting effort after kind of running poor the start before. She took a fair bit of respect in that race on March 27th and just didn't really get going. We'll take a look at that replay actually for another horse in a little bit. But Lily Pooh has a nice effort coming into this race, but is going to have to pick it back up, getting back onto the main track. The number 5, Doing It the Hard Way, daughter of Street Sense for Bob Baffert, who she's been pretty consistent throughout her career. She has had a fair share of kind of disappointing performances, though, as well. I think she's had some excuses, whether they were maybe going a little too short. One of those races that was at Sunland Park. Now she comes into this race fresh off a win, but I want to look at her maiden victory. It took her 6 starts to get the job done, but in terms of how she kind of shines in this race, it's a pretty impressive performance visually. You can see her tail is swishing, but she is responding to, in this race, John Velasquez, and she is going to draw clear here by almost 10 lengths in the end, 9 to be exact. And I do understand it was a compact field, and she raced well, but she actually wasn't favored in this spot, which is interesting. You always think Bob Baffert short field, probably going off favorite in a race like that, and wasn't. And that's because you looked at her, they had some high hopes for her. They put her in the Grade 1 Starlet as a maiden. She finished 4th, and then she really disappointed going 3/4 of a mile. So she put it all together, as we saw at that mile distance at Santa Anita. Did not fare well at Sunland. And then more recently, I thought she raced very well going 7/8. Love to see Bob Baffert and Hernandez team up. They just do wonderful things together. There was 33% the past year at Santa Anita. We'll move on to the number 6, Ancient Peace. This one out of the John Sadler barn, one of 2 for the barn to be exact. His fourth last out, going a mile and an eighth on the turf, is going to get back onto the main track, and really, kind of by no fault of her own, she's only had that one try on the dirt. It was a winning one 2 starts back. She really opened up on that field of 5 and drew clear and ended up holding on to win by, I say holding on, but she ended up winning still by 6 lengths. Now, you have to think that was a race carted for the turf, and then when it gets moved to the main track, a lot of those horses were not aiming for the main track. But for her, it's her best effort in terms of numbers and the way that she was able to win in styles. So she could be part of that pace perspective in here, could be forwardly placed. I do think she's going to offer value in here because I do think her stablemate to the outside of her, the number 7, Anywho, who we'll talk about next. I think this horse is going to take a lot of play. Now, she's a lightly raced, just 2 starts under her belt, a daughter of Bolt d'Oro. We'll take a look at her second career start. Now, she won on debut. The number was not flashy by any means at that Belmont at Aqueduct meet. But look at her in this race and see her circled in the Her Honest Racing colors. You can also see Lily Pooh is going to be a very distant, 5th in here. But the way Anywho is able to really pick it up here in the stretch, and you see Coffee in Bed, the favorite, is trying to make up ground. I really like right about there the way she kicks in. You see that tail swish, and she does a draw clear in here. A 90 by her speed figure wins by 2 lengths. Now Joe Bravo is going to climb aboard her for the first time. I think she can be tactical. She's shown that in her last 2 starts. I think that makes her sneaky in here and one to certainly use. I think when you look at this field top to bottom, it's pretty wide open, and it's tough to maybe figure out exactly the complexion of this race with other horses maybe having those races at a mile and a 16th and some stretching out from, say, 7/8, like the case of Anywho. But that's the field for Saturday's DRF race of the day. Don't forget on your mobile device to click or scan the QR code and look at those free PPs for this field. Now, for me, when I kind of went through this, it's torn between 2 horses. I ultimately went to the number 5, doing it the hard way, just looking at the races from her going, say, a mile and even more recently 7/8. I think she's going to handle a mile and a 16th really nicely. She does have experience at the distance, is still looking for that win, but I like what we've seen so far. I think the connections are hard to ignore. The number 1, the Alice Look, is who I ended up going to next. A new acquisition for Chris Davis. She's hard to knock. She just raced so well in the Kentucky Oaks, but my concern is those horses coming from the East Coast to California, sometimes it's a hard jump and vice versa. So she's never been out to the West Coast, and we'll see what she's made of against these kind of California horses that she's going to face that are based out there. Then I go to the number 7, Anywho. Very curious to see this horse on the stretch out. Has been very impressive, especially second time out at that 7/8 distance. And then finally, the number 2, Window Shopping. I think kind of just looking at the Richard Mandela operation and how they train Window Shopping, I think we're going to see better things and bigger things from her in the future. And she's still trying to figure it out, I think. And she kind of showed that last time out. So I use her as a minor player in here. But for me, the number 5, doing it the hard way, ends up being my top pick. Good luck.